We're just waiting for live streaming. We'll be starting in a second. Lovely. Welcome to the meeting of the Combined Authority, and thanks ever so everybody for getting into Leeds today, and welcome to our observers. Can I just remind everybody that this meeting is being live streamed and for the public, and if you'd like to speak, please do remember to use your mic so we can capture everything that you're saying. If you want to refer to anybody away from the table, they won't be heard, so please use your mic. That would be great. Before we start, if I may, I'd like to make some general comments, and I'd like to place on record my thanks to the fire service over the last few days, and there were 734 call-outs, and obviously they were supporting neighbouring communities. South Yorkshire in particular was really, it seemed to be on fire from the news footage. So thank you, how they protected communities across the region. And although there wasn't a major incident declared in West Yorkshire, the demands in normal circumstances would have resulted in requests from neighbouring services. And in fact, the fire chief said this is an absolute game changer that's happened over the last few days. And that extreme weather obviously is a result of climate emergency, and we need to continue to do what we can to achieve net zero for 2038. When we last met, I updated the committee on the industrial strike between Arriva and Unite, and you'll be aware that services experienced further strike days last week following the rejection of the offer by Unite members. They rejected it. I was disappointed, as I'm sure you were, at the lack of notice given for those strike days, and I made that known both personally and publicly. And privately to both sides. The two sides met again on Monday, and I understand that a revised offer was agreed and again is being put to members. And I'm really hopeful that that offer will be accepted. We can't grow boss patronage if there are no bosses, and it's really important, of course, that people are paid properly. And I'm really crossing my fingers that now we can move forward in Wakefield. Obviously, we put this into greater context that there's a period of indefinite strike action on Arriva in Merseyside, Greater Manchester and Chester. That began yesterday. And of course, we're in the midst of a cost of living crisis with inflation expected to peak at an unfathomable 11% later this year. And workers everywhere, understandably, are looking for a better deal from their employers, and in West Yorkshire we're not immune to this, and I'm sure my colleagues across the Pennines will be taking the same approach as I have, speaking to both sides, encouraging a swift resolution in the interests of passengers. There's also been a few changes in government since we last met. I don't intend to make any comment on the Conservative Party leadership contest, but I did want to emphasise that the changes in Number 10 and Westminster are not without consequences here in West Yorkshire. And you may have seen Michael Gove being quoted as saying that government is fundamentally not working currently because of this, the changes there. And this impacts on us here in West Yorkshire. We've been working to finalise the £830 million City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement and our £70 million bus service improvement plan, but our understanding was that that would be agreed by the time Parliament went into recess, which was yesterday, and unfortunately we're still waiting for sign-off. But that's not going to derail us, it's not going to change our plans, and we're going to press ahead on the assumption that resources are coming. So I just want to be clear to everybody around this table that we're going to go ahead, but there may be consequences because we have been waiting for government to sign off the money. And it really does strengthen the case that myself and other mayors have been making, that funding should have been devolved so we could just get on with this job without extra meddling we've had from advisors in Number 10 and Whitehall that have been holding us up with quite detailed analysis and commentary on our plans. We're also waiting for the terms of reference to be published about how to bring HS2 trains from Sheffield to Leeds. This is 8 months on from the IRP, and I would have definitely expected the study to be well on the way to being completed. But instead, government indecision has meant its scope has yet to be fully agreed. And finally, I just wanted to mention that I've just returned yesterday from a visit to the Harvard City Leadership Initiative, kindly funded by Bloomberg, which brought together 40 mayors from across the world and allows us to develop links with cities and regions facing similar challenges to ours. And I know this is going to be the start of an ongoing relationship with those mayors that I met, but also with Harvard, learning from their smarts on solving the problems and challenges we face. And I really know that I was on the programme 6, and so there's been mayors and leaders who've already been on the course, and the feedback from those leaders, Marvin and in Bristol and others, they've said they really benefited from the support going forward and brought greater connections to their regions, and I intend to do the same. So without further ado, on to the agenda, and can we have apologies, please, Ian?
So we've had apologies from Councillor Hinchcliffe, Councillor Holdsworth and Councillor Jeffrey, also from their substitutes, Councillor Khan, Councillor Galton and Councillor Morley.
Thank you so much. And declarations of interest. Do any members of interest they wish to declare on any items on the agenda? No, thank you. Item 3, exclusion of press and public. No items coming to this meeting have been identified as including exempt information, so there will be no need for members of the public to leave. Item 4, minutes of June 23rd, 2022. Are there any comments or questions on the previous minutes? No. Thank you. We're content to confirm these as an accurate record. Thank you. Righto. These are now items for decision. So moving on to item 5, the BSIP Enhanced Partnership Scheme. Now, this item on the agenda is the next step towards implementing the Bus Service Improvement Plan, which this meeting approved last October. We, as I mentioned, wait for the confirmation of the grant of 70 million over 3 years. To gain access to these funds, we need to establish an enhanced partnership scheme, and this report is seeking our approval to do so and to proceed to deliver the cheaper fares element that we discussed in the autumn. It was the £2 cap fare and the £4.50 day saver, hopefully saving some people £500 a year on their bus fares. So with Councillor Hinchcliffe having given apologies, could I turn to Dave, please, to talk us through this item?
Thank you, Mayor. As you just said, we're awaiting the Bus Service Improvement Plan announcement. We asked the FT officials this morning. As said, it's with ministers. So, as I think the Mayor has just said, we proceed in expectation that that'll get signed off. What this report's doing is essentially establishing the required partnership framework under which the almost £70 million would be spent and deployed, and that's a partnership between the combined authority, bus operators, and the constituent councils as well. So this paper is seeking approval to establish that. Just to recap, the BSIP funding identified around £37 million for bus fare reduction, as the Mayor's just described, and a further £31 million for network improvements. There's a definite process under which we need to go through for this enhanced partnership, so we need the approval today to establish that and start that process. And that process involves a process of engaging bus operators and then a process of engaging with wider stakeholders before the scheme is formally made. And so this starts that process. We have been through this process before. We established our enhanced partnership plan earlier in the year, and we established an enhanced partnership scheme for infrastructure, and this one is the enabler for the bus service improvement plan funding. So it's recommended to you to proceed with that, but also to start the planning around implementing the fares elements of it in the autumn, ideally September or October, and that we sort of press on in terms of making all the arrangements for that to happen on the basis that the funding comes from the BSIP award, which we believe is imminent. So that's the recommendation in front of you, Chair.
Thank you. And also just to add that this is going to be quite a swift turnaround over the summer, getting it ready for September, October. And part of it is a consultation. So the Mayor's Big Boss Chat is going to run alongside that, so that the 31 million for new routes or to reconnect communities is undertaken in complete partnership with the public and those that might not use the buses yet, or those that use the buses already. Any questions? Councillor Poulsen.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm sure we all welcome the funding that we hopefully will be coming through this scheme. I think bus users and the public out there, they want a reliable, affordable service, and getting the £2 ticket that the government funding is going to give us is absolutely welcome. And I think as a combined authority, we should be welcoming that money. From what you said in your earlier remarks, obviously Arriva is a huge concern to a lot of residents across West Yorkshire, and it's great having a low funds, but if there's no buses actually on the roads, it's a complete waste of time for the poor people that are actually cut off at the moment. So can I just ask what discussions you have had around the table with Arriva and with the unions to hopefully get this resolved in the next week, because it really cannot continue as it is. No matter, we're getting this great funding coming through from the government to give better service, reliability, cheaper fares, but we need the buses out there to represent all our communities.
Sorry. And can assure you from this week, the Arriva buses are running absolutely fine at the moment. Nobody's cut off this week. But that's an important point to make.
If I may, once it goes out to ballots, then people are back at work whilst the ballot goes ahead. So buses are running. I think, to your point, everybody around the table who's a leader will have had an inbox full of people whose lives were made a misery, and some people almost tipped over the edge financially, having to get taxis rather than buses. This is why we need this new plan, which is absolutely about growth and is about ambition for the bus network. But to reassure everyone that I was in consultations with both sides regularly and will continue to do so, because it's really important that we have a robust network. However, it isn't helped by government giving us this cliff edge in the later in the year, where now with a sustainability plan, it looks like potentially we could be losing 11% of our routes, 62 routes across West Yorkshire, because we can't get that certainty from government. So I will still be making the case to government that we need that support for our bus companies and our networks, because it can't be that we use our bus service improvement plan money to hold up a network that is a network we want to expand and transform, rather than just stop it from falling over the edge of a cliff. But I take your point about the financial impact during a cost of living crisis that this has had on the general public. Ben.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just to elaborate upon the point about the funding sources, I think the next paper will be dealing with the fact that we've got kind of two funding sources to support services. You're absolutely right. You need the right combination of fares and services. As the Mayor has said, the BSIP funding from the government is ideally to be focused on additionality in services, but that would include services that have been withdrawn. So one of the challenges that Dave and the team face is how to manage the funding that comes from the existing tendered service budget, which comes from the transport levy, from the people of West Yorkshire, with the government money, in order to blend the best possible service combination going forwards.
Thank you for that clarity. Yes, Councillor Robbins.
Thanks, Matt. Two questions, if it's okay. One of them, I think the funding is very, very welcome, and moving to a position where we have that confirmed as soon as possible would be great. Maybe questions that Dave can answer here. With the new plans, what measures are in place to ensure reliability of the service? Because it's all well and good seeking to expand the network and looking to make sure we that communities that are cut off are able to be far more connected and able to access services and provision. But actually, many of the existing services at the moment are struggle for reliability. It's not that the bus isn't there; it's that it doesn't turn up on time. It means that you can't get to other connections. So, what's in place as part of this programme to ensure that there's improved reliability? The second question, within the report, you talk about integration initiatives as well. My understanding is that some of the bus companies in West Yorkshire don't have the software, the hardware in place on their buses to be able to deliver some of the £2 provision at the moment and the connectivity services. Is that the case, and has that been flagged to you?
Dave.
Okay. On reliability, reliability of buses is influenced by a number of factors, but the two main factors are how well managed the service is in terms of getting the buses and the drivers in the right place, and then how the highway network performs. Now, and the bus network has been challenged by driver shortages as well, which is a national problem that other industries as well as buses have. But one of the things that the enhanced partnership and the partnership structure we're putting around there is a greater sort of transparency around performance and reliability, and we've already started doing that with the Bus Alliance in terms of publishing figures in terms of how reliable buses are, and using the data that we've got to actually delve into the causes of that reliability, so that we can understand both the management reasons for that and both the highway reasons. In terms of the highway infrastructure, the CRSDS programme actually has some further highway interventions, and that the Transforming Cities Fund and the Leeds Public Transport Improvement programmes and the other programmes we're running with all have elements which are there to improve highway conditions for buses. So quite a lot of work done to do that, as well as work to understand where the hotspots and pinch points and things like that are. So there does need to be, as Councillor Robinson says, a focus on performance in this partnership. Is not just about spending these chunks of money, it's about actually managing the whole components of the bus service as one piece, rather than the sort of very separated way things have been done in the past. In terms of the ticketing integration, there shouldn't be any reason why any bus operator can't implement the maximum £2 fare and the £4.50 fare with whatever equipment they have. All of the larger bus operators actually use the same technology platform by Transport and Design, and so that involves being able to read bank cards, involves being able to read mobile phone barcode tickets, and enables them to read smart cards as well, so that they should be able to do the full range. We do have some smaller operators who are not well equipped, and one of the things which we are looking to do is to make sure that their ticket machines are brought up to speed, so that they can read the barcodes on the app in particular. So there's some work to do there. But in terms of cash fares, they should be able to take that. And I think we're talking about a very small number of bus operators in the region that don't have all of the equipment to do that. The other thing we do need to do, is again covered in the CRSTS programme, is that to have the ultimate, which is where people tap on and top off and only have the money debited from the bank account based upon the actual number of journeys they've made, etc., does require fitting what we call tap out readers, so people can actually scan their card or their phone on the way out of the bus as well to measure the length of the journey. Some of the bus operators already have that now, and our plan through CRSTS funding is to roll that out. So there is one eye on the technology, but I think the number of customers who would be disadvantaged because the bus ticket machine can't read the barcode is quite small, so I'm reasonably confident with that.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Just a quick follow-up, if that's okay, Mayor. Many of those smaller providers that are out there will serve some of those rural communities. They serve people who have no other option than that bus, and that bus might be once an hour. So can we get a commitment today that the technology will be in place so that the go live date means that everybody in West Yorkshire has the same service, the same provision that's available? And if that means working with these smaller bus companies, getting the tap out technology ready, that we're ready so that everybody has the same service come the autumn to be able to deliver this.
Just to be clear, the tap out functionality isn't needed for the autumn, but ideally the ability for people to pay for their travel, whether it's by cash, by debit card, or by pre-purchase on the app, ideally should be the same uniform. What we have been doing is working with all of our school bus operators, some of whom actually run non-school services as well in rural areas, and we have actually been working towards them being fully equipped by the September return to school anyway, because the under 19 tickets that we predominantly sell through apps now, and it's really important that those buses can read it. So we are talking to a small number of operators whose buses aren't equipped, to get them up to speed, and to look at how we can get them on board as quickly as we can. But I wouldn't want to hold the whole programme up because 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 buses cannot be equipped by the date. But we are very conscious of the fact that this does need a uniformity across the piece. So we're sort of focused on that.
Thank you, Dave. And certainly that's why we need to make the decision today, isn't it? So we can get on and then start that integration and that tech work. And also to your point, Councillor, about the reliability, bus companies were telling us again and again it was drivers. That's why we've invested in driver training, and that's why I fronted uniquely and unusually a recruitment programme with all the different operators for 1,000 more drivers, particularly women. I hear it from the public, and we must make sure that the bus companies have enough drivers who are competent and are able to do that job. So, are we happy to approve the publication of the notice of intent subject to feedback from the Department of Transport, the progression of the scheme through statutory milestones, and agree that the arrangements to implement the cheaper fares proposal proceed in consultation with myself and the Chair of Transport Committee? Happy to approve? Thank you so much. Good stuff. And moving on to the next item, which is yet again buses, item 6. And this is bus service revenue funding and expenditure. As we know that, as with many public services, buses are impacted by increasing inflation, and this report updates us on the current position and recommends a vehement, which I had to look up, and that is team and labelling, moving from one account to another to stabilise this position. And it's worth mentioning we have to keep a careful eye on this over the coming months, not least because, as I mentioned earlier, speaking to Councillor Paulson, at the end of the bus recovery grant comes to an end in October. Now I've written to ministers asking that they taper the end of funding from October rather than giving us this cliff edge, but unfortunately that has been rejected. And this item focuses on the resources available locally. And so if I can pass over to Angela, please, to talk us through this detail.
Thank you, Mayor. This paper follows on from an item that we took earlier this month to the Finance Resources Corporate Committee, where we were presenting the year-end close-down figures, and as part of that, we were confirming the final spend on bus services. We achieved an underspend on concessionary travel, which we knew was likely because of some of the actions that had been taken earlier in the year. But we also ended up with an overspend of just over £1 million on tendered services. We have talked at most of these meetings over the last 2 years about the difficulties faced by the bus industry, about the actions being taken to fund by government, by ourselves, and the changing pattern of funding, the changing patronage, actions taken by government and by operators all contributed to give us what was quite a stable budget. It's now become quite a volatile budget, and now it's being impacted again by the inflation that at the time we did the budget in February, nobody saw inflation of this level, as the Mayor alluded to in her opening remarks. The paper sets out some of the current and future challenges around expenditure on bus, but it also highlights the need that because of that volatility, we really need to make sure we're absolutely on top of financial control, monitoring and reporting of expenditure on bus services. So internal audit are currently reviewing the arrangements in place in transport services to ensure we have got everything absolutely right, and we have committed to bringing regular reports back to the Finance Resources Committee on actual and forecast spend, and also to this meeting as needed. The paper today asks for a decision to, in effect, rebalance the tendered services budget for the impacts incurred to date. This is not about future actions, and this does not enable rapid responses to some of the challenges we know are coming up. We need to do more work on that. But in effect, the £1 million overspend last year flows through to this year's tendered services budget. It's inflation that rolls through on contracts. It's additional bits of service that were let that will continue into this year. So we are asking for a formal environment, and it is actually a very old-fashioned word in very much a local authority budget sense, but it is a formal environment from the in-year concessionary travel budget, where we hope to follow through the underspend from last year. So we're asking to take 2.1 million from that budget into the tendered services budget. As I said, it solves the problems we have to date, but it still leaves a lot of work to be done around all the other moving parts of the bus funding environment, and we will come back later in the year with options, consideration, what do we do with this, where there's a paper later on the agenda that talks about the work we're doing on inflation generally, and there's a sort of in-depth review of the current year budget underway to come back to you with the pressures, the challenges, the options, and there may be choices that need to be made in the autumn. But this will set us straight for the current year and give us a clean base to move forward from. I was happy to take any questions on the paper, and Dave's here, obviously, if there's any detailed questions on particular aspects of the bus funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Any questions? No? Okay, thank you. So we are happy to note the current position and approve the requested vehement. So if we can note and approve, fantastic. Thank you all. Moving on to item 7, the UK Share Prosperity Fund Investment Plan. This notes the progress made on the UK SPF Local Investment Plan following last month's meeting, where members approved the submission of the first 2 local investment plans. Multiply, you'll know that's the adult numeracy, submitted to government June the 30th. And the next is the main core UK SPF Local Investment Plan, which goes to government next week, 26th of July. The report sets out the proposed governance arrangements for the local partnership group and seeks authorisation for the Managing Director to finalise and submit the plan to government in consultation with myself and district leaders. So if I could, can I hand over to Mark Roberts to provide further details, please, as Alan Rees is absent. Thank you.
As you say, this paper sets out the progress that's made since this item came to the Combined Authority agenda last time. Since then, we've submitted the local investment plan for Multiply, which is that adult numeracy budget. And now, next week, as you say, we need to submit the local investment plan for the core UK SPF programme, which would unlock £68 million of funding. So there's 2 things, as well as the update, that we're asking for in this paper. The first is to approve the establishment of the West Yorkshire UK SPF Local Partnership Group. So there's the terms of reference, which are attached in Appendix 2 to the paper. And just to say, this is an advisory group, and it combines a broad membership across local authorities, the private sector, and some other representative groups. The full list of members are also set out in the appendix. The partnership group would report into the Combined Authority via the Finance and Resources Committee, and the proposal is that I will chair this group as the interim chair of the LEP board and also the deputy chair of the Informally, this group has already met 3 times now to help shape the drafting of the plan, and it seems to be working well. The second recommendation is to authorise RMD, Ben, to finalise and submit the local investment plan to government in consultation with the Mayor district leaders and myself. So this is an exact meeting. I think writing the draft investment plan has been a real team effort. It's been led by Heather to my left, and co-produced by a team right across all the authorities with input and feedback from lots of stakeholders, including that local partnership group. We also have an MP and builds on the West Yorkshire investment strategy, and it's driven by those outcomes that we want to achieve. It is high level. It is a strategic plan that does what it needs to do to unlock the £68 million of funding from government. But importantly, it gives us sufficient flexibility over the lifetime of the fund to make sure that we can maximise its impact to the region. I think before I open to questions, just want to say we need to get this over the line for next week's submission. But when we do, the work on implementation really begins. And it's going to be a big job to make sure that we get the plans in place so we can start actually delivering things this side of Christmas from October. And straight after this meeting, I'm meeting with our local partnership group to both give the feedback from this meeting and also start to shape that implementation work. So thank you, Mayor. I will pass over.
Thank you. Any questions on UK SPF? Yes, Councillor Poulsen.
Yeah, just a couple. I don't know if anybody can clarify, obviously with Alan not being here, but we've got a lot of funding coming in at the moment in certain areas, Towns Fund, Levelling Up funding bids. Where will projects sit with the Prosperity Fund? Will they be able to bid for within all three categories, for instance, or will one mean they can't go forward for this one? And the second point is just on the membership of the local partnership group. Having a look down the members, it does say in the appendix that this should give an appropriate breadth of representation, but I don't see any cross-party representation on this. So maybe we'll get some clarification why there's no political cross-party representation on this as well.
Thank you. So Heather, to the first point.
Thank you, Councillor Paulson. The Shared Prosperity Fund, we will be working out what we call the routes to market are in terms of how partners can access the funding. Some of it will be delivered in-house. So when we say in-house, that will be a mixture of a couple of combined authority projects alongside sub-activity in the councils. But there will be an awful lot of the fund which will be accessible to other partners to access. But we do need to still work through, as Mark said, in terms of what the routes to market are and how accessible. But just because you have applied to the Towns Fund or Levelling Up Fund does not prevent you from applying for Shared Prosperity Fund. There will be no restrictions in that respect. In terms of the membership of the local partnership group, it's not intentional to not have cross-party, and that's something we can further consider.
Thank you so much. Ben, and then Shabir. Shabir.
Thanks, Mayor. Yesterday I was at the LGA Exec Advisory Board meeting. Before that we had the Council Forum, and one of the speakers was Greg Clark, the current DLUC Secretary. It keeps on changing. And one of the things he's acknowledged, because many of you will remember that he was the Secretary of State for DCLG some years ago, and he was one of the pioneers of devolution. He was the one who was actually spearheading the Manchester devolution, and then everything else happened after that. But he's back in post. He did say he don't know how long for, because he might change again. But one of the things he's reflected on was there's so many different pots of funding. You've got UK Shared Prosperity Fund, Towns Fund, Levelling Fund, this fund, that fund, and everybody started chasing the tails, and he was very keen to get the portal up and running for the Levelling Up Fund. But the reason I'm saying that is because it's not just a cross-party thing at the combined authority level or at the local authority level. There's some real work that we need to do at the LGA level, because it is a problem, and we don't want to start talking about the cost of living crisis, but we do need to deliver. And it says added bureaucracy that's created and there's so many different funds that's going around, we'll miss the point and we'll miss the boat. So it's something that government has recognised, Exec has recognised that, and hopefully, things will get sharper and more focused. Just a final point, Mayor. I did ask when we were talking about this some months ago that there's a lot less money in the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. The allocation is low, the expectation is high, plus everything else what I said in terms of different pots of money. So there is something that we need to do as the combined authority to actually work with government to make sure that we start delivering for the people of West Yorkshire and beyond. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Shabir. And if I may say, I think I gave evidence to the Levelling Up Bill Committee and said exactly that chasing these small funds is not efficient. It makes no sense. Just devolve the money to us and we know where we need to spend it and what we need to spend it on. And just to your point, Councillor Paulson, regarding cross-party, there is also an expectation and a government expectation that members of Parliament will be part of the group, and that is absolutely cross-party. I don't know, Mark, if you want to just talk us through some of the members so far.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, so that we have a group of 22 MPs in West Yorkshire who are part of the MP engagement group. I think there have been a number of sessions to bring that group of MPs up to speed. I have also written to them personally earlier this week to ask for their endorsement and to field some questions, because I think it's fair to say we have got some work to do to get that group of MPs really engaged in helping us deliver the programme, because the numbers of endorsements were low before we started on that this week.
Thank you. And Ben?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Separate points, if I may. The first, just to Councillor Paulson's points on funding streams. We very much want to be in a position where applicants can submit projects and the joining up about exactly how they're funded is done kind of behind the scenes, so that we don't have applicants having to bid for multiple funding streams, filling in numerous different templates and forms. The current environment makes that quite challenging. The Devolution Investment Fund should hopefully be able to be used as a way to achieve that. So that's something that we're actively trying to work on going forward. We'll be able to do it on some streams over others in the short term, and it really remains to be seen, I think, whether we can do it within the funding, the rules of the Shared Prosperity Fund. But it's definitely an aspiration because that works for bidders. And I think the second thing that is a minor point in the scheme of things, but it's just worth thinking about, is that there's the additional burden that we have to report against all these individual funding streams rather than the overall outcomes that are being achieved with the totality of the funding. And so we'd very much, again, like to move to a place where we can be reporting on overall outcomes as in addition to the government's requirements around funding streams. Slightly separate point, if I may. As Mark has said, the paper seeks, one of the recommendations is to seek delegations to me in consultation with the Mayor and the leaders for the investment programme. I think given the amount of exposure that programme has had and the work that's been done with leaders, with their officers to date, if members are minded to make this the proper approval and for us to lock the document at this point, I'm absolutely happy to do that. And I know, Heather, you're comfortable with that. So if we're happy to kind of up the ante on that recommendation to make it just the full approval of the investment strategy to be submitted, then that's certainly fine by me. Thank you.
Councillor Rob.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, Councillor Pandor and Ben have said something that's made me think here, because we've got all these breakdowns of different pots that are within the document as well, and we just said we find it hard bidding in for lots of different government pots. So how does it work when a bid comes in across these pots? How are we going to track that? If somebody is doing something that's seeking to support decarbonisation but do skilling at the same time, how do we do that and how do we track that within this? So we've got it right here in West Yorkshire. We don't make it difficult for people who are bidding. Secondly, we've talked about levelling up. Levelling up is not just public funding going to deliver levelling up, it's actually how we leverage in private sector funding as well and make that go even further, and we make sure that money is spent in West Yorkshire, whether it's on creating jobs, whether it's new innovations, whether it's new technology. How does that get captured within this as well and reported back and making sure that that's transparent as well? Thank you.
Thank you. So Ben, and then maybe Heather would like to comment as well. Ben.
I'll say this in advance of the officers to understand the technical detail, but certainly that aspiration of a bidder with a project bidding once, regardless of how many pillars it benefits or would seek funding from, I think is absolutely essential. So I want to say that our aspiration is to make it as easy as possible for those with projects to bring those forward. Exactly which bit of SPF funds it is then, I think, for officers to work out in the background. I think the constraint is actually what will be the operational rule book that we've got to comply with, and can we achieve that outcome in that context. So I think that's the challenge that Heather and the team will face, and that Mark, in terms of chairing the operational board, will have to manage.
And when it comes to business, Mark, have you early thoughts about how to involve business?
So I think we have some really helpful precedent with some things in the growth deal where we've been able to get business support to get match funding. I think it is early. The timetables for UK SPF have been set very ambitiously by government, and we are responding as quickly as we can. I'm very keen to get this document in place so that we can start to work on application, but absolutely the intention is to involve as many of the businesses who want to support us in this work and to amplify the funding so that we have a bigger impact.
Thank you. Any further questions, Brian?
Just to comment on the private sector leverage, we've set a target of 14 million for private sector leverage from business support programmes in this financial year, some of which will come through UK SPF funded activity.
Councillor Robinson.
Just to be clear, so 40 million, that's in relation to the local business pillar that's there within the report.
No, that's across all programmes, excluding inward investment.
Okay. I'm just wondering, maybe we, and I don't want to put Brian on the spot here, seek to be maybe a little bit more ambitious than that 14 million, given that there's 68 million in this pot. I'm fairly certain we can eke that a little bit higher, particularly with your initiative as well, Mayor.
I may say, Councillor Robinson, with your connections as well, that might be useful as well. This is not just a one-woman show, it's all of us. Great stuff. If we're happy to move on to the recommendations, great. So it is for us to note progress for the two further recommendations. Can we firstly confirm they'll approve the establishment of the West Yorkshire UK SPF Local Partnership Group and the appointment of Mark Roberts as the chair in his capacity as interim chair of the LEP? And secondly, as Ben raised, can members confirm authorisation for Managing Director to finalise and submit the local investment plan to government for the core UK SPF programme on behalf of the CA in consultation with myself and district leaders, but additionally...
Yeah, I think what I'm suggesting is that we take out the delegation bit, that this is simply the approval of the investment plan, if members are content with that.
Thanks for the clarification. We're all happy to approve? Fantastic, thank you. Moving on to...
Sorry, Mayor, I think procedurally we just need to get that amendment moved and seconded. So someone can second that change.
Thank you for that, Rebecca. Thank you for that, Rebecca. Who would like to move?
I think you moved
Councillor Swift will second. Great, thank you. All good? Thank you very much. Wonderful. Every day is a school day. Thank you very much, Rebecca. So item 8, mass transit. This is vision, organisation, governance and resourcing. This is about the mass transit programme that sets out the next key steps for this really exciting development for an ambitious transport system. The paper outlines the progress we've made in the last 12 months, securing 200 million to take forward the programme over the next 5 years, appointing a new director and a further revised vision for mass transit. Major infrastructure programmes like this obviously do take time to get right, but I'm really pleased that progress is being made. Mass transit currently has cross-party support nationally and locally, and I think it's incumbent on all of us around this table to keep that cross-party approach to maintain it. It's a multi-billion pound programme that's going to require funding from many various multiple different colour hues parliaments. I'm looking forward to working alongside you all to secure those commitments in the future. So if I may hand over to Kevin, our Interim Director of Mass Transit, to provide further information. And I believe, Kevin, this is your first meeting to the Combined Authority. You are so welcome. Over to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. So the paper here talks to the ambition and vision for mass transit. It also looks at the proposed governance changes and also the resourcing implications for mass transit as we move forward. Within the report, it notes the transformational plans for mass transit and what that will bring to the people of West Yorkshire. It notes mass transit is integral to that bold ambition to make West Yorkshire greener, more inclusive and better connected, and is based on a modern world-class public transport system using modern forms of mass transit. The paper touches on the draft Mass Transit Vision 2040 document, which has been updated to reflect feedback received to date, and it proposes that there's a further round of engagement on that vision document ahead of a final version being formally adopted as a daughter document to the statutory local transport plan. The vision forms an essential policy foundation to any future inquiry into the scheme, and as such is an important aspect to be adopted as part of the statutory local transport plan. The report then goes on to note in terms of governance that through close partnership working with the district partners, we've reviewed the arrangements for the promotion of the mass transit proposals, and having considered a range of options and also considered legal advice, it proposes that the combined authority is the sole promoter for mass transit, with the district partners being key strategic partners to that arrangement. The report then notes the proposed update to the governance arrangements for mass transit, and it proposes as follows: that the Transport Committee and the Combined Authority are remain the formal decision-making bodies, but there's the creation then of a member transit strategy group being implemented to set the mandate and ensure delivery of the outcomes of the programme, and also the establishment of a senior transit leadership board chaired by the Managing Director, which will report to the transit strategy group and has a clear mandate around delivery of the mass transit programme. And then finally, I refreshed the existing transit programme board, which will continue to work in partnership with the district partners and suppliers. Finally then, the paper talks about the team resourcing and looking to the organisational design review that's been carried out and establishing the Mass Transit Directorate through looking at key areas for that structure under programme management, project management and technical teams, supported by enhanced corporate functions within the combined authority. It sets out then the need for 3 key heads of service to support that structure and those teams, and those 3 key heads of service are structured around sponsorship, development and delivery. And then finally, the paper also talks about the position on funding. So mass transit is supported through the development phase through the CRSTS funding, and that will take us through the business case development and Transport and Works Act order powers process. But there will be a need for further funding applications in the future for implementation and delivery, and the business case work goes a long way to supporting that. In fact, it's an essential part of supporting that. So within the report, it also sets out the indicative timeline for delivery of the first phase for mass transit, and that is set out to meet the ambition of having spades in the ground, starting construction before the end of the second mayoral term. So that's what the paper proposes, Mayor, and I'd welcome any comments and questions on that.
Thank you so much, Kevin. And just to also mention that whilst draft was across the detail, this is not a draft. Is that correct, Kevin?
So the paper itself is not draft. So the vision document itself, the actual vision document, is still held as a document that's open for consultation. So until it's finalised through that consultation, I guess the vision document itself would be.
Thank you so much. So let's take some questions. Any questions? Councillor Robinson.
Let's open the batting. Thank you, Kevin. It's nice to meet you as well. And delighted to have you with us today. When we talk about mass transit, it captured the imagination of the public. That's why some 80% of people, I think, are backing the vision that's there, because they see a need for it. It means that it's more than just cars, it's more than just buses. It's actually a mass transport system that allows multiple people to travel in the same vehicle, getting to the same place quickly, efficiently, and without impacting on the environment. I think the challenge that's within some of the vision is actually what those modes of transport are going to look like. Actually, I think people get a bus. I think they understand it because they see it every day. But actually, if it's meaning a tram train, something that's interchangeable, that is less clear in here. And so I guess question one is, where are we moving to and where are we thinking on that, given that we expect spades in the ground by 2028, which is 6 years away, and we know that infrastructure projects invariably overrun, invariably go over budget, and with inflation costs going up at the moment, that budget impact will come even sooner. So what does that actually look like in reality for somebody? The second part of that question then is, in terms of mapping it, there are colleagues around here who've served as elected officials longer than I have. Every time you go to a consultation, people are always in favour of the vision of something till the route runs past the end of their garden or it goes past their window, and then everybody's against it, and then everybody objects, and then we get into the legal field, and that's where the lawyers end up stepping in, and we go through all sorts of legal battles as well. So when are we looking like we're going to have some sort of mapping that's clear to people that they can say, well, actually, I get what this means for me, because if we're in London, we would be in a situation where actually house prices go up where you are closer to better transport facilities. In West Yorkshire, we seem to be in a crazy position where house prices go up the further away you are from better transport facilities, which seems completely oxymoronic to me and the absolute antithesis of what we want to do within this vision. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Kevin, there's a couple of questions there.
Thank you. Thanks for those questions. Really interesting. Thank you. So around mode choice, the vision document, as you rightly referred to, doesn't make a specific decision on that, and that is to allow the current work, the development work that we're looking at now, through business case development work, through modelling work, and through concept design development. It allows space for that work to progress, which will inform then the mode choice that would be appropriate to meet those potential demands and corridors. So those choices are still to be made, and they will come through that development process. And I think that's likely to be in the next 18 months or so. So there is quite a lot of development work to get through. It is in a structured manner, strategic outline case initially, and then an outline business case. And around all that, we will be looking at concept design learned route corridors. So it is deliberately held in that situation just now to give ourselves the scope to look at that. I think the ambition, however, is to look to the future, to look at modern systems, and there are various modes that are mentioned in the vision document, such as very light rail and vehicles of that type. So it is a case of really what suits which route. There will be, or likely to be, a core requirement for a mass transit solution, and then beyond that, perhaps other alternative modes looked at, depending on the demands. So that's probably a response to the first part. Maybe it touches on some of the second part as well, in terms of when will we get a plan. So we are working through that now. The vision sets out the 9 corridors. And within that now, we're starting to look at the level of detail around, albeit concept at this stage in terms of its design level, but around what are the route choices within those corridors. So, and that will pick up on where are the key demands, where are the key nodes that we need to be attracting, directing the mass transit at meeting those requirements. So again, I think for the initial phase 1 that was talked about in the vision document, we're looking at that over the next 18 to 24 months. So there's quite a bit of development work to get through. There is planned consultation through those processes, as you would expect, and we will be looking to progress that throughout next year.
And certainly this is not an easy project, and this is why it's fallen a number of hurdles already. But it's about political will and getting this over the line. So collectively, I think it's something that I'm determined that we can deliver. And that's why I wanted cross-party involvement as well in the strategy group. And I think, you know, together we can deliver this for the people of West Yorkshire. Because, as I say, this is going to go through so many different parliaments. With 200 million, it's a £2 billion project, and there's going to be further demands for money, and we need that collective will that we're all wanting to deliver this project. Ben, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Meg. So I think you've covered the first point I was going to make, actually, which is that the governance structure that's set out here will allow us to be sharing developing issues with members on an informal basis as soon as we can. As Kevin has said, it is really important that we've got a firm evidence base, that it's clear what the decision should be before we risk any kind of blight or other impacts on communities within West Yorkshire. So we need to make sure we've got that right. I also think, and this is going out on a limb slightly, that planning a mass transit network off the back of the connectivity vision that we've been sharing and that Kevin is working on is more complicated in a world where the boundaries between private and public vehicles becomes more fluid in a world of autonomous vehicles. And it's a conversation that's kind of been live for some time, but is kind of getting additional momentum now. And so I think it raises more questions about what's the right kind of technology and the right kind of system. There might not be one technology across different parts of West Yorkshire. It might be that different technologies can use the same routes for different purposes, and that move away from kind of public transport, private car towards one that is more fluid with more diffuse boundaries between them, I think is both really exciting, but also creates, you know, challenges for Kevin and the team in trying to design and put project boundaries around things.
Councillor Robertson.
As usual, Ben's already ahead of me, and the next question I was going to follow, which is on things like, actually, are we looking to sort of test bed and sandbox new technology, autonomous vehicles? Are we looking to speak to government and apply for that and see how we can do that and it won't be across West Yorkshire because that's too big, but in certain communities to allow us to do that? Is that something that's part of the thinking at the moment?
Kevin?
Thank you. So yes, I think absolutely we need to be looking at a system that has the flexibility as well as we move forward. So we want something that is resilient to the future and an ever-changing world. The autonomous vehicle world is certainly coming upon us, and it opens up great opportunity, I think. So I think we will be looking at that, and if there is opportunity to look at piloting something perhaps with industry as well, I think we should be considering that.
And certainly my ambition for our combined authority is to be the most innovative combined authority in the whole country, and the most future facing. Mark, I don't know if you wanted to come in about businesses' role in this.
Thank you, Matt. And just to reflect conversations, I'm in full agreement that we should be pushing our technology as much as possible. And I think there are world-leading private companies who are at the forefront of autonomous vehicles and other technologies that we should be interacting with here, but also to do it in a Yorkshire way. So in ensuring, for example, we have seats with Yorkshire wool as well as autonomous vehicles from wherever they may be.
Thank you, that's a great point. Any further comments? No? Okay, so are we happy to confirm we endorse the vision and approve undertaking further engagement on the final draft ahead of it being adopted as a daughter document as a component of the local transport plan in the future? Happy to endorse. Approve the new governance model, including the creation of a member transit strategy group and a transit senior leadership board. All happy. Approve the combined authority becoming the sole promoter and client, with the district partners being strategic partners for the development of mass transit. All good. Approve the creation of mass transit development team reporting to the director of mass transit and the managing director. Good stuff. Thank you so much. It is such an exciting project, and everywhere I go I talk about our mass transit vision because it's going to really hurtle us into the 21st century and improve productivity and inward investment. It's hugely exciting. Thank you so much, Kevin. And it's also reassuring to know that you've delivered something similar in Edinburgh. So we are definitely in safe hands there. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 9, corporate matters. This sets out the measures the Combined Authority is taking to respond to rising inflation and cost pressures, which are affecting the organisation, our projects and programmes, and of course, as we've heard, West Yorkshire residents. We already discussed measures we're taking to reduce bus fares, which is going to make a really big difference. But this report includes further information on their planned medium-term financial strategy and an update on our organisational evolution programme, which is going to ensure we're best set to respond to future challenges. So if I could turn to Ben to talk us through the details of the report.
Thank you, Matt. So this, as the Mayor said, this paper's in two parts. The first part is a scene setter, really. It puts into one place the various work streams that are underway to look at how the organisation and the Combined Authority responds to the very real cost inflation pressures that people are feeling. And it divides it into three categories. The first is around the policy response, and as the Mayor said, the decisions around being able to implement reduced bus fares across West Yorkshire is the mainstay at the moment of that. But there will be other policies as we work up additional ideas where we can deploy additional measures to try and ease the impacts of cost pressures on the communities and people of West Yorkshire. So there'll be more to follow on that, but you've taken early the decision on buses, which will enable us to enact that, which is fantastic. The second stream is around the work that's been reported to various committees, including the Financial Resources Committee, that Melanie's leading on managing the cost pressures in our capital programmes, and work is underway across our district with our district partners in how best to manage that, both within projects and across programmes. And we're kind of mindful of the discussion we had earlier about joining up between programmes. Melanie is looking at things across the totality, not focused on any particular individual programme. The third area is then looking at what our corporate organisational response needs to be. That's particularly about managing inflationary pressures, both in our current contracts, in things such as our energy costs, and also, of course, in the pressures on pay negotiations over the coming year. And again, setting out the issue here, what we think that would necessarily result in is a new medium-term financial strategy for the organisation, and we need to base that on a number of scenarios that we'll work through in September. That maps out what are the options that we face and how do we best manage that through. So on all three topics, there'll be further papers in the autumn coming to the Combined Authority, but we thought it was sensible to set it out here so you can see the whole picture. And then the second part of the paper builds on the paper that you took last time on the organisational response, both to the massive increase in activity that the Combined Authority is undertaking, the expansion of our budgets, which I won't repeat everything that we discussed last time, but it is just worth repeating that our budgets have doubled since kind of 2015-16. The numbers of activities that we are working across has expanded, and the Mayor and her 10 priorities, 10 pledges has further expanded the work that the Combined Authority is doing. That requires additional resources. It also requires us reviewing how we go about things to find more efficient and effective ways to do things, and to kind of reflect the deepening and more maturing relationships with our partners. So that's the backdrop. At the last Combined Authority meeting, you approved the structure, and we promised at that point that we would bring back the individual new director profiles, and this paper fulfills that commitment and has those role profiles as annexes for the Combined Authority's endorsement. As I think the key point to recognise is are twofold. The first, the move away from our current structure, which is about profession, towards one that is focused on directors having individual outcomes within their responsibilities, and therefore it being easier for individual directors to look at the totality of the action to occur in a particular policy area. And then the second is the increase, the changes in the structure to increase the breadth and the level of delegation within our structure to allow the kind of overall bandwidth of decision making in the organisation to respond. In effect, we're moving from an organisation where its senior structure was fit for kind of an organisation of 200 to 300 people to one that is more like a local authority that's reflecting an organisational size of kind of 600 to 700. So those are the two broad drivers of the changes to the role profiles that are here before you this afternoon, and happy to just take any questions in more detail.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay, we're all happy to approve the recommendations. Great stuff, thank you. Moving on to item 9, to corporate matters. This sets out the measures the CA is taking. Oh no, apologies. We're moving on to carbon impact assessment, item 10. And this report gives us an update on the carbon impact assessment project. Obviously, tackling the climate emergency was one of my mayoral pledges, and the West Yorkshire Climate and Environment Plan has already been developed. The project approvals paper later in this meeting asks for development funding to accelerate the Wave 1 actions in that plan. We've got to get on with this work. The Carbon Impact Assessment Project is a key piece of work which has been developed, and it's got methodologies to ensure the carbon implications of proposals can be considered by decision makers while a scheme is being developed. And I know how challenging this work is, but how vital it is to our thinking going forward. So I wonder if I'd like to hand over to Councillor Swift or to Kevin. Councillor Swift? Matthew. Sorry, Matthew. It's Councillor Swift.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be fairly brief on it because it's quite a technical topic in many ways, and we had quite a lengthy discussion at the Climate and Energy Committee earlier in the week. As you said, this is important in terms of enabling us for the future to understand what the carbon impacts of schemes is, and I think that gives you potentially two tools. One is to question whether a scheme should go ahead at all, and the second is to make sure that if it does go ahead, it's designed in a way that minimises its carbon impact or maximising its benefit in terms of decarbonisation. I know there'll be a lot of interest in the work that's being done on assessing the carbon impacts of existing schemes and projects, but again would highlight the sort of the cautionary notes that are put in there. Much of the data that was needed for that was not developed at the time when the schemes were being developed, so there is an element of estimation in there. And what the modelling shows is that it's very sensitive to the assumptions that we make about future trends. And I think particularly in terms of road schemes, the big uncertainty is the issue of kind of induced demand. You know, there's always an argument that if you improve roads over time, that simply leads to more use of them, but putting a figure on that is really quite challenging. So I think this is an important piece of work. I think it will shape how we develop individual projects, and I think it's one lever, but only one, that probably leads us to question how we allocate resources in the future and how we think about priorities going forward. But it isn't the whole answer to that. It's quite hard to work out what the strategic implications of particular schemes cumulatively are. So, for example, cycling schemes don't seem to show particularly good return taken in isolation, but if the impact collectively of schemes is that it leads to a significant change in the level of cycling, then obviously that's very significant in terms of modal shift, but that's quite hard to build into an evaluation. So it's an important tool, but not the whole answer. I think that will be my rough summary of it. And I know that if people got questions about the detail, I'll hastily defer to Matthew.
Thank you so much. And Matthew, would you any further comments additionally to that?
Well, all I would add is that the assessments that we've made of existing schemes, we've learnt an awful lot from carrying out that process, and that has fed through into the development of the methodology. So the development of that methodology has been strongly informed by the assessments that have been carried out. So it's been an enormously important learning exercise for us in order to make sure that carbon impact assessment process is as useful as it can be, and provides the necessary information to decision makers to allow them to take carbon impact assessment into account when making their decisions.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Yes, Councillor Paulson.
Yeah, obviously really welcome the report and the briefing we've had on it. It is quite a complex thing to sort of get your head around, but officers have been really good, and Matthew in particular, in trying to simplify it for us. Obviously, just two quick questions. One is, going forward, when we get approvals in future, obviously coming through Melanie's team, will this be built into it? Will we be able to see, as combined authority approving schemes, you know, what the carbon impact assessment is of individual new schemes coming forward? And also, a lot of the promoters are the local authorities and partners across West Yorkshire. Are our transport teams ready? I mean, we've got 3 leaders here, but are they ready to run with this and to make sure it's fully embedded in schemes going forward coming from local authorities?
Thank you. It's an ongoing process of learning, isn't it? You're absolutely right. Tim, I wonder if you wanted to come in on that.
I'll probably hastily pass that one on. I wondered whether Liz or Melanie might be. I think probably Liz might be well placed to respond to that.
Thank you. So the team have been working on embedding it into the assurance framework. So Matthew's been doing quite a lot to make sure that the processes and the templates and what we ask promoters and ourselves to fill in will have this detail. I think, as you rightly say, though, it is really complex, and actually there's a lot of understanding needed. And I think, Matthew, I'm right in saying that there's going to be training as needed. So I can't say is everybody up to speed as of today, but the aim is to try and work with promoters for all the lessons that Matthew has set out should be passed on, and teams can be helped. This is not an easy task, and I think there's an awful lot, as I think Councillor Swift has said, around what assumptions, and so there's also a job for us to do to help with what some of those assumptions could be, which we also need to feed into this.
Thank you so much, Liz. And certainly, having been at a meeting hosted by Hilary Benn MP and Leeds City Council, it is so important we do this work to identify. We're talking about retrofitting homes. Actually, what probably would be better is to take down poor quality housing and rebuild something that's sustainable and green and enjoyable to live in. But the carbon impact of demolition is so great that what we should be doing to balance that out is retrofitting. So it's really important, this work. I want to congratulate you and the team, because you are a new frontier of learning and helping us all understand how we approve projects and how we look at projects and developments going forward, that tackling that, reducing carbon emissions for our community is so important and has to be a priority for us going forward. If we're going to hit 2038 zero carbon, and in Leeds it's 2030, we've got to get moving now, and this is an absolutely pivotal part of the work, so thank you. So are we all... Councillor Waller.
Sorry, it's just a question. Is it tons of carbon or tons of carbon dioxide?
The normal metric is tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, so it's not just carbon dioxide, it's also other greenhouse gases, and that's what we'll be reporting in terms of.
That's such a technical question, Councillor Waller. I don't even know what the answer means and whether that is helpful to you.
It's just that oxygen, if you've got 2 oxygen atoms with the carbon, then that's a significant heavier weight than just the carbon.
Thank you, and thank you for your attendance at this meeting. Always raises the bar. Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
My question's going to be nowhere near as good. It's like being sat next to the periodic table. It's just a question for Matthew then. So from when this goes live, what threshold or metric is hit for a scheme to not move forward because of its CIA?
Thank you. Matthew? And then maybe Melanie would like to come in?
I think that's a very difficult question. We have always said that carbon dioxide is just one factor that should be taken into account by decision makers. So we wouldn't like to say you shouldn't pursue a scheme which has a given amount of emissions, whereas all schemes that have a lower amount of emissions we don't need to worry about. I think it's fair to say that we would look at proportionality. So for smaller schemes, which are likely to have a lower carbon dioxide potential, then we would require a lesser standard of assessment of those schemes than we would for larger, more emissive schemes. I'm hoping that the reporting requirements note, which is an annex to the paper, makes it clear what we are asking promoters to do. It makes it relatively simple for them to do what we would like them to do, to report carbon dioxide equivalent emissions in a simple, straightforward way, but also to report the inevitable assumptions and forecasts that have been used to derive those emissions. And in a way, that's one of the things I wanted to get across in this paper, is that it's really important that decision makers consider not just the numbers, but also the way that those numbers have been derived and the inevitable assumptions and modelling conventions that have had to be used in order to arrive at those numbers. It's not an easy subject, but we hope that we're going to provide decision makers with sufficient insight and understanding so that they can take that into account, certainly in a much better way than they have been able to in the past.
Thank you. Melanie, I wonder if I could come to you at the end of comments and just to sort of round it up. So Mark, then Councillor Pandor. Mark.
As a member of I just wanted to highlight, I think, a very important point that Councillor Swift made at the introduction of this. So I think this methodology is extremely helpful and gives us a new level of understanding, and thank you very much to Matthew and everyone involved in the work. But at the Climate Committee, we discussed that there could be a danger in looking at individual schemes in isolation here. And so what we need to be thinking about is more systems thinking, taking the schemes together, in particular, thinking about transport, the debate needs to be wider than just transport, and we need to consider how people are living and working, and that can include the role of digital. But to have the meaningful impact that we want, we need to take a systems-based approach and a much wider lens than individual schemes. I just wanted to underline the point that you made, Councillor Swift. Thank you.
Councillor Pandor.
Thank you. Just going on from what you're saying, the wider debate. A few years ago, I was in London, and they had a big march, big demonstration around climate emergency, and every single local authority was passing motions to combat the climate crisis, and we all set targets. I was walking down just past Whitehall, and this young lady got out from her dad's car with a placard, saving the planet. They were driving a 5-litre diesel Mercedes. And I thought, God, and that is actually true. That's what happened. I was Peter Box at that time, and the question that came in my mind was, we know there's been a crisis for many years. We've all been hearing about this for many years, but people still find it very difficult to actually adjust and change lifestyles, and it's what you're saying, the wider debate, and just the conversation we were having with Matthew, right, the technical side of stuff. Every time I go into a different room with different professors, they tell me different arguments and different data. But to me, as a local leader, and I think that's what you're saying, as 3 local leaders, how do we actually navigate our way through this? And it's very difficult because it's changing people's hearts and minds. How do we get the average Joe public to recycle? How do we get the average Joe public from move to diesel to petrol to electric vehicles on the back of their normal worries? And it is very difficult balancing act. One of the big issues for me as a leader with the scheme that we're looking at in Kirklees is air quality. So if we're trying to get a scheme approved where we'll improve the flow of traffic, because that particular area has got big issues on air quality, it's probably one of the most deprived areas in Kirklees that we're talking about. And we all heard about the tragic case where a young black girl lost her life because of poor air quality in London, and that's one life too many. And these are real issues. These are issues that haunt me, and I've got to grapple with every day. Because one of the things that I see on a daily basis is we get genuine concerns around addressing the climate emergency, but then on the other hand, we've got these massive health inequalities that we've got to address. And if you do a proper consultation in that area, everybody wants the scheme to go ahead. But then on the other hand, you get people saying, well, you can't go ahead. And that's very, very difficult. And that's where, as local leaders, you know, we have to make a decision. To do nothing would be really easy to do. And I'll tell you why, because the people who are suffering in terms of poor air quality and deprivation and poverty will never ever be able to actually come forward and raise their voices in the council chamber, or come forward, and they don't understand that, you know, their understanding of how democracy works is very, very poor. So that's where we as leaders come in. You know, that's where local councillors come in. That's where councillors at a local level come in who understand their communities. So, you know, I just add to what you were saying, Mark, that there's a wider debate around here, and whatever decisions we make, we have to make the right decision. But it can't just be purely scientific, although scientific debate is important, because another set of data, another set of science will actually throw the argument out. A health argument is big. So we're just going to try and navigate our way through and deliver, but at the same time, going on what Mark was saying, that there are wider debates that we need to take into account. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you so much. It's a thoughtful addition to our conversation, but the zero carbon is focusing our minds, isn't it, about how we deliver that, but also health inequality with people dying from poor air quality and the particles in the air, and what do we do about that? And I think one of the biggest issues for me is transport. If we can get more people out of cars, petrol cars, diesel cars, we're at least going some way to better air quality. But thank you for that submission. Councillor Robinson.
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate you taking me before Melanie comes in, because I think Melanie will be able to answer some of the questions there. I think Matthew and Mark hit on a really pertinent point as well, which is about understanding the data here and how we extrapolate some of that data. There is a real risk that because of the complexity, that actually SMEs who are bidding from contracts are the ones that can't produce this information, can't access the data, can't be able to deliver it, or not be able to deliver it as easily as some of the large corporates there. So hopefully when we are looking at contracting and we're looking through that procurement process, we are helping SMEs, some of those who are SMEs who are the most innovative, as we want them to be in West Yorkshire, at reducing reducing the carbon impact and tackling climate change, but don't necessarily have the resources to be able to do that in terms of that procurement process, and so hopefully that can be factored in. And similarly, I appreciate Mark's point, which is about the complexity here. Welcoming Kevin again. Kevin risks being the biggest producer of carbon in delivering a mass transit system, but also the biggest aiding reducing carbon as well. And I think we need to be mindful of that when we are looking at mass transit systems, when we're looking at projects that come forward. It's not necessarily just what happens in the construction or the demolition and the construction phase, but actually the longer term impact. To Councillor Pandle's point, there are, looking at a 60-year time frame, there are a huge number of variables in doing that and what could be delivered. That is a long, long way out. And I think that poses some questions, but this is improving all the time, so I think it's a good first step on this.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. And certainly regarding SMEs, Brian may tell me if I'm wrong here, it's the ReBiz programme, which supports small businesses to be more energy efficient and, you know, helping businesses with that investment, because it may be something that's on the bottom of their list given the crisis that's facing business at the moment. Okie dokie. Thank you. Melanie, if you wanted to just wrap up those thoughts.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just to come back on the appraisal point, and there's been a few comments that have been related to that since the original question from Councillor Poulsen. So we assess our projects and programmes against the 5 cases that are set out in the Green Book by HM Treasury, and carbon is one of those elements that sits within the economic case. And what we were finding is, before we did this piece of work, we didn't have any consistency in terms of how that was being reported. So how could we inform decision makers in terms of what the carbon picture looks like if we didn't have that consistent approach? It doesn't have a pass or fail criteria, but what it does is allow you to make an informed decision against all the cases. So the strategic case may be so strong that on when we do the Transport Fund, the web tag assessment, that may be weak. So the BCR may be weak, but if the strategic case is so strong, that could overrule one of the other cases. And it's the same with carbon. If the message that's coming out about carbon is so strong, it would overrule or override some of the other cases. So the weighting that we put on those cases is up to us locally to determine that. So it is to get a consistent approach, but it's also to help to inform your decision making.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful, Melanie. Thank you. Are members happy to confirm that the contents of this report? Yep, great stuff. Thank you very much. And thank you again, Matthew, for and the team. This is really tricky stuff. So thank you. And I'm sure it will be evolving as the years roll on. Okay, so moving to Melanie, project approvals. This report provides details of schemes recommended to the CA for progression through the assurance process. So Melanie.
Thank you, Mayor. So the first of these is related to carbon. So this is the West Yorkshire Climate and Environmental Plan. It's wave one. So when the plan was brought through and discussed at the Climate Committee, they identified 39 actions that were needed to achieve net zero carbon by 2038. And this wave one proposal is the first 7 of those that will come forward for consideration. So there is £40 million that has been allocated against climate and environment through the gain share. So provisionally there is funding available, but it is not going to be sufficient to do everything. But this is the first wave. We're looking at Better Homes Hub and Better Neighbourhoods. So we're looking at helping those fuel poor communities where we will help to look at retrofit and insulation and training for those communities. We'll be looking at business sustainability, so that could be decarbonisation plans, or it could be helping to reduce the carbon footprint of that business. We're looking at flood adaptation grants and flooding and drainage interventions, energy efficiency with households and businesses, and looking at increasing clean energy generation through the installation of solar panels or battery storage. So these are the things that we've identified as being those that need to happen in that first wave. And the proposal here is that we approve this decision point, which is decision point 1, it's a strategic assessment, and that work commences on activity 2, which is the strategic outline case for wave 2. And the total value is estimated to range between 42.5 million and 66 million. But until we've done further development work, we won't be able to confirm that. But also, there is still an allocation that is fixed, if you like, through gain share at 40 million. And we will be trying to seek alternative sources of funding to allow us to deliver what we want to do as our local priorities. So the recommendation is that the funding sought here is 836,240 for further development work against an indicative funding allocation of the 40 million. And then future approvals will come through the assurance process. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions on this? Obviously, it refers absolutely to what we've just been discussing, that we have to get on with this. And I talked publicly about the 40 million for climate emergency, and we're still, coming to committee about discussing sign-off. So I really hope everybody approves that we move forward. Good, thank you. That's a good day at the office. Thanks very much. Melanie.
Yeah, so the second of the 3 projects today is part of Leeds 2023 City of Culture and the activities that are planned and the programme that's planned across the city next year. So this is Women of the World, Women of West Yorkshire, shortened to WOW, which is one element of the City of Culture. It's one of the programmes that is proposed, and it is particularly looking at improving the engagement of women and girls in construction and design. And there's the intention is to have co-production of a business plan for this element of the programme, working with those groups to define what the activity at the end of the programme is going to look like. So the proposal here is that we move from decision point 3, which is an outline business case, that work commences on activity 4, which is the full business case, initially to release funding of 551,672 with an indicative allocation for this of 1.5 million. And this is funding that had been identified through the culture and creative industries priority through gain share. And we'll have more information as that co-production process continues.
Thank you, Melanie. And Women of the World is an organisation that's run many of these events on the South Bank. It's going to be bespoke to Yorkshire. So it's working with a group that have already got a really great track record. But I think investing this money to work with communities, so it's co-created, so it's not something that just lands on our community, but that comes from the ground up. So are we happy to approve? Great stuff, thank you. Moving on, Melanie?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, the third scheme for consideration today is Leeds City Centre package. Now, the elements that we're looking at today is the City Square Plus package. And just to explain, there are a number of key infrastructure interventions within Leeds City Centre. This is part of the City Square Plus package, which involves primarily the closure of City Square, which we've discussed a number of times through this committee, and also looking at improving East Parade bus gate. Thirsk Row will become two-way operation, and Calverley Street reconfiguration. And there's also some traffic management measures and improved signing. But it is all intended to stop the traffic coming through the city centre that doesn't need to come into the city centre. It is going on to another destination that is currently directed through City Square. So the intention is that we either divert it onto the ring road, or we stop that volume of journeys and reduce it significantly by adding in the extra mileage that you would have to travel if you came round the city. So it's part of a wider plan to look at the traffic management across Leeds city centre. And this is one of the pieces of the jigsaw that fits alongside other funding through the Transport Fund, the LIPTIP, the Leeds Public Transport Investment Programme, and the Transforming Cities Fund. Now, the costs for this scheme have gone up slightly, and there is no headroom at the moment in the Transport Fund to increase any of those costs. So we are proposing that there is a bit of a cocktail of different funding elements, including Transport Fund, Section 106 monies, and a contribution from Leeds City Council. So the proposal here is that Leeds City Council will underwrite the funding gap. If the funding comes available within a programme, then we'll consider that alongside any requests from other sponsors as well as part of our programme review. But it does allow the project to move ahead at this stage when we haven't quite got enough grant funding at this time to be able to allow it to move forward.
Thank you. Any comments? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Matt. I think there's been a lot of comment in the last couple of weeks within Leeds City Council about the City Square proposals and what comes forward. I fully understand the need to reconfigure some of the bus networks and bus lanes and what it's seeking to do. I imagine that most of the traffic that is coming through City Square, a large number of pieces of those traffic, are people who will be going to the train station to pick somebody up, family members, whoever that's there. With the closure of City Square, presumably they would have to go down the Ring Road, Wellington Street and other areas, but they aren't within the improvement package that's here. They wouldn't change, so there'd be increased pressure on other roads, but they're not within the package of improvements. Are you able to say any more about that, Melanie? James might want to, I don't know, so yeah.
James, you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, the traffic volumes that come through City Square prior to the current work were hundreds, and you couldn't fit hundreds of people in the station car park, so I think clearly the station isn't the main destination of traffic coming through City Square. I think, as Melanie said in introducing, this is part of a component of a bigger jigsaw of traffic improvements around the city centre and around the inner ring road area as well. Capacity has been created elsewhere that mitigate the loss of capacity coming through City Square. In terms of traffic, plus when you sort of sit it alongside some of the other schemes like the Sturton Park and Ride, Ellen Road Park and Ride and things like that, that have been developed to reduce the number of vehicle journeys into the city centre. It is part of I recognise we're looking at an approval of a single bit of a project, but it is, like I say, a piece of a larger jigsaw, both in terms of the immediate bit of the city centre we're sat in, but also traffic movement around the city as well.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Melanie?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to say that there are lots of different elements of the projects, and they're all looking at different aspects. So that there are other schemes that are looking at walking and cycling access. There's other schemes looking at, you know, the access from New Station Street and Ball Lane. So there's lots of different schemes going on. What we could do is maybe bring a map forward with all the activities that are going on, so that we could share that with members, because there is a lot going on with different funding programmes.
That might be helpful. Thank you for that. Are we happy to approve? Yep, great stuff. Thank you. Okie dokie. Thank you very much for that, Melanie. And I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. Item 11 is minutes for information. And thank you, everybody, for attending today. And may I remind members, the date of the next meeting is the 9th of September. And if I don't see you before then, please have a restful holiday. And I would encourage everybody to take some time off with your families and to recharge your batteries, because certainly when we get back for September, we're going to be hitting the ground running, because there's so many projects that are going to be underway. There's going to be so much work that needs to be delivered. So rest up and see you all in September. Thank you.